Hey guys, tonight we slip into the sun-scorched markets of ancient Mali, where gold dust glitters in every palm, and you're dodging camels, while merchants haggle over beans, yes, beans, to weigh their precious metal. Picture yourself in Timbuktu's bustling heart, circa 1300 CE, the air thick with desert heat, the scent of roasted nuts, and the jingle of cowrie shells. You're brushing past traders in vibrant robes, their voices a low hum, like a bedtime story you didn't know you needed. Spoiler, you probably won't survive a day here without mastering the art of bean-based math. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in Timbuktu's central market, sand crunching under your sandals. It's the Mali Empire at its peak, a sprawling trade hub that makes medieval Europe look like a sleepy village. The Mali Empire, founded around 1235 CE by Sundiata Keita, was a West African powerhouse, controlling gold and salt routes across the Sahara. You're surrounded by merchants from as far as the Mediterranean, their donkeys laden with goods. Gold is king here, mined from the south, but it's not just shiny nuggets, it's dust weighed with obsessive precision. You notice a trader, his fingers deftly sorting tiny beans, dropping them onto a balance scale. These aren't your average baked bean side dish. They're raffia seeds, small and uniform, Mali's quirky answer to measuring wealth. You squint at the scale, wondering how beans could possibly be trusted for something as valuable as gold. Historians still argue whether this system was pure genius or a logistical nightmare. Some say it was brilliantly consistent, others claim it invited cheating. Either way, it worked well enough to make Mali's rulers like Mansa Musa stupidly rich. You're not exactly ready to swap your digital scale for a handful of seeds, but there's something soothing about the rhythm drop, weigh, nod, repeat. Imagine trying to buy a coffee today with a baggie of beans. Good luck explaining that to the barista. You wander deeper into the market, past stalls piled with indigo cloth and salt slabs. The air hums with deals, and you're tempted to barter for a carved wooden mask, but you'd probably overpay. A trader eyes you suspiciously like you're about to pocket his gold dust. Don't worry, you're just here to soak in the vibe, not start an international incident. The beans, though, they're everywhere, little reddish-brown specks that decide fortunes. You can almost hear them clinking a soft percussion to lull you into the story. Ready to learn why these beans were more than just a quirky gimmick? Let's keep going. You're still in Timbuktu's bustling market, the sun beating down, making your tunic stick to your skin. The gold dust shimmering in merchants' pouches catches your eye, but it's the beans, those tiny raffia seeds, that hold your attention now. You're about to learn why these unassuming seeds became Mali's go-to tool for weighing gold, turning a humble plant into the backbone of an empire's economy. Picture yourself crouching beside a trader, his fingers flicking beans onto a bronze scale with the focus of a chef seasoning a stew. It's oddly hypnotic, like watching someone knit a scarf you'll never wear. In the Mali Empire, gold was everywhere, mined from rich southern fields like Bambouk and Bure. Historical records like those from 14th century traveler Ibn Battuta confirm Mali's gold-fueled trade across continents reaching Arab markets and beyond. But raw gold came as dust or nuggets, and you couldn't just eyeball it for a deal. Enter the raffia bean, small uniform and reliable. You watch a merchant drop exactly 200 beans to balance a pile of gold dust, each bean roughly 0.05 grams, making the math weirdly precise for a time when calculators were just clever people with abacuses. It's like using jelly beans to buy a car today. You'd laugh, but it worked. Here's the quirky bit. Some traders swore by soaking beans in water overnight to make them slightly heavier, squeezing an extra pinch of profit. Historians still argue whether this was widespread cheating or just a clever workaround for inconsistent seeds. You can imagine the debates at market stalls, merchants side-eyeing each other's damp beans, muttering about fairness. It's not exactly high-stakes drama, but there's a quiet comedy in picturing a trader getting caught with soggy seeds busted like someone slipping Monopoly money into a poker game. You're starting to get the rhythm of this place. Scoop gold, count beans, strike a deal. The beans aren't just weights. They're a language, a way to trust a stranger in a dusty market. You try counting some yourself, but your fingers fumble and a merchant chuckles at your rookie moves. Don't feel bad mastering this. It takes years, and you're not sticking around that long. The air smells of roasted yams now, and a camel grunts nearby, reminding you this market never sleeps. But you're here to drift off, so let's focus on that steady clink of beans on scales, a sound as soothing as rain on a tin roof. Want to see where these traders go next? Let's follow them. You're leaving Timbuktu's market now, your sandals kicking up sand as you join a caravan trudging along Mali's trade routes. The sun's relentless painting the horizon in hazy oranges, and you're sweating through your robe, wishing for a modern invention like iced tea. You're following traders who rely on those raffia beans to weigh their gold, and these routes stretching across the Sahara to distant cities are where their wealth comes alive. It's a slow, dusty journey perfect for zoning out, like listening to a lullaby made of camel hooves and creaking carts. The Mali Empire's trade network, peaking in the 13th and 14th centuries, was a marvel, connecting West Africa to North Africa, the Middle East, and even Europe's fringes. You're on a path linking Timbuktu to Sijil Massa, a Moroccan hub 500 miles north, where gold was swapped for salt cloth and manuscripts. Camels plod beside you loaded with goods, their bells jingling like a sleepy metronome. Each trader carries a pouch of raffia beans ready to weigh gold at any stop. You try keeping up, but the heat's got you dreaming of a nap under an acacia tree. Good luck, because these guys don't stop for daydreamers. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some traders tied tiny bells to their bean pouches, believing the jingle warded off bad luck. Historians still argue whether this was superstition or a practical way to deter pickpockets. Imagine a thief trying to sneak off with a jingling sack. You chuckle, picturing a bandit fumbling like a cat caught in Christmas lights. the sounds oddly calming, though blending with the desert wind. You're tempted to jingle a pouch yourself, but the trader's stern looks say, "Don't mess with the system." You pass a water station, a rare oasis, where traders refill goatskin bags. One offers you a sip, and it's warm, gritty, like drinking a desert smoothie. Yep, you're not built for this life. The beans in their scales, though, keep everything fair, grounding this chaotic journey in a strange, soothing order. You're starting to feel the rhythm of the caravan, each step a soft thud pulling you closer to sleep. Ready to see what gold does beyond these dusty trails. Let's keep moving. You're back in Timbuktu now, the caravan's dust still clinging to your robe as you wander through a quieter corner of the city. The market's hum fades, replaced by the soft clink of gold being worked into intricate shapes. You're here to see how Mali's gold, weighed so carefully with those raffia beans, wasn't just currency, it shaped art status and culture in ways that make your modern bank account feel a bit dull. Picture yourself ducking into a craftsman's stall, the air thick with charcoal smoke, watching gold shimmer under flickering oil lamps. In the Mali Empire, gold was more than money. It was a symbol of divine favor and power. By the 14th century, Mali's rulers like Mansa Musa were flaunting so much gold during pilgrimages to Mecca that they crashed Egypt's economy. True story, look it up. You're watching a goldsmith hammer gold dust into delicate earrings, each piece destined for a noble's wife or a griot's ceremonial robe. These artisans weren't just craftsmen, they were storytellers weaving Mali's wealth into jewelry and masks that screamed status without saying a word. You're tempted to try on a gold bangle, but it's probably worth more than your entire apartment. Here's the quirky bit. Some goldsmiths mixed tiny bits of crushed raffia bean into their gold alloys, believing it added spiritual strength. Historians still argue whether this was a sacred ritual or just a way to stretch expensive materials. Either way, it's like baking a cake with a pinch of magic fairy dust. You smirk, imagining explaining that to a modern jeweler who'd probably think you're nuts. The process is slow, deliberate. The hammers tap, 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 lulling you like a heartbeat. You step outside, noticing how gold decorates everything, doorways, saddles, even the emir's sandals. It's ostentatious, but oddly soothing, like a visual whisper of wealth. A kid runs by chasing a stray goat, and you wonder if he dreams of owning gold or just a full belly. The beans, though, are never far. Merchants nearby are still weighing gold dust, their scales swaying gently. You're sinking into the rhythm of this place, the soft glow of gold pulling you deeper. Want to see how they actually weigh this stuff? Let's get closer. You're back in the heart of Timbuktu's market, squeezing through a crowd of traders, the air buzzing with their haggling. The sun's dipping low, casting long shadows, and you're drawn to a merchant hunched over a bronze scale, performing what looks like a sacred ritual with those raffia beans. You're about to witness the art of weighing gold, a process so precise it feels like a dance, each bean dropped with the care you'd give a newborn. The clink of seeds on metal is your lullaby tonight, steady and slow, pulling you deeper into Mali's golden world. In the Mali Empire, trade was the lifeblood, and gold weighing was its heartbeat. By the 1300s, Timbuktu was a global trade hub, as confirmed by chronicles like the Tariq al-Sudan, where merchants from across the Sahara swapped gold for salt cloth and spices. You're watching a trader pour gold dust onto one side of his scale, then drop raffia beans each about 0.05 grams onto the other until they balance. It's not rocket science, but it's close for a time when tech meant a well-carved stick. You try to count along, but the merchant's speed makes you dizzy, like trying to keep up with a barista during a morning rush. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some merchants whispered to their beans before weighing, believing it ensured honest deals. Historians still argue whether this was spiritual devotion or a psychological trick to focus. Imagine muttering to your calculator before paying bills. You stifle a laugh picturing a trader sweet-talking his seeds while rivals roll their eyes. The ritual's hypnotic, though scoop, pour, drop, adjust. You're close enough to smell the gold's faint metallic tang mixed with sweat and market spices. A camel snorts nearby, jolting you, and you nearly knock over a stack of beans, smooth move rookie. The merchant doesn't notice, too focused on his scale. You're starting to feel the market's rhythm, each beans clink a soft nudge toward sleep. Remember those jingling bean pouches from the trade routes? They're here too, adding a faint chime to the scene, ready to dig into where these beans came from. Let's step back in time. You're stepping away from Timbuktu's noisy market, now the clatter of scales and shouts fading as you wander toward a quieter grove on the city's edge. The air's cooler here, scented with dry grass, and you're surrounded by raffia palms, their fronds swaying like sleepy sentinels. You're about to uncover the strange history of those raffia beans, the tiny seeds that Mali's traders trusted to weigh their gold. It's a story that's less about glitz and more about nature's weird practicality, perfect for easing you into a drowsy haze. The raffia palm, native to West Africa's riverbanks, was a 14th century MVP in the Mali Empire, not just for its beans, but for its fibers used in ropes and mats. You're standing under one, its shadow offering a rare break from the sun, and you notice the small reddish-brown seeds scattered on the ground. These were harvested, meticulously dried, and sorted for uniformity. Think of it as ancient quality control. Chronicles from the time, like those of Arab scholar al-Umari, note how Mali's traders relied on these seeds for their consistent weight, making them ideal for gold. You pick one up, rolling it between your fingers. It's lighter than a penny, but carries the weight of an empire's trust. Here's the quirky bit. Some farmers claimed raffia trees whispered when ready for harvest, a rustling sound guiding pickers. Historians still argue whether this was folklore or an early understanding of wind patterns signaling ripeness. Either way, it's like the trees were auditioning for a fantasy novel. You smirk, imagining a tree whispering, "Pick me," while you're just trying to nap. The process was slow, deliberate, with women and children often sorting beans by firelight, their chatter blending with the night's hum. You kick at the dirt, unearthing a few more seeds, and wonder how something so small became so vital. A nearby farmer offers you a sip of palm wine. Spoiler, it's tangy and not your thing. Those beans, though, keep pulling you back. their simplicity oddly soothing, like counting sheep, but with higher stakes. Remember the merchants muttering to their beans in the market. It started here with these trees. Want to dive back into Timbuktu's chaos? Let's go. You're back in Timbuktu's market. The sun now a fiery orb low in the sky, painting the stalls in golden hues. The air's thick with the scent of grilled meat and dust, and you're weaving through a maze of traders, their voices a steady hum like a distant lullaby. You're here to soak in the vibe of this chaotic, colorful hub where raffia beans and gold dust are the stars of every deal. It's a scene so alive, yet so rhythmic, it's practically begging you to close your eyes and drift off. Timbuktu in the 14th century wasn't just a market, it was the beating heart of the Mali Empire's trade, a crossroads where African, Arab, and Berber cultures collided. Historical accounts like those from Ibn Battuta describe it as a city of endless commerce, where gold, salt, and even manuscripts changed hands. You're dodging a donkey cart piled with salt slabs, nearly tripping over a stray basket of raffia beans. Merchants are everywhere, their scales clinking as they weigh gold with those tiny seeds you saw back at the palm grove. The market's a sensory overload, bright indigo cloths shouting hawkers, the tang of overripe fruit, but it's weirdly calming, like white noise for your brain. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some stallholders kept pet parrots that mimicked trade calls, shouting gold for salt to draw customers. Historians still argue whether this was clever marketing or just merchants showing off. Imagine a bird hyping your Etsy shop. You laugh picturing a parrot squawking bad deals while its owner haggles. You pause at a stall watching a trader fan himself with a palm leaf, his beans neatly lined up like soldiers. You're tempted to barter for a carved wooden cup, but your haggling skills are about as good as a camel's table manners. A kid darts by tossing a pebble that nearly hits your foot. Yep, you're not blending in. The beans, though, keep things grounded, their steady clinks tying this chaos together. Remember those whispering raffia trees. Their seeds are here balancing scales and fortunes. You're sinking deeper into the market's rhythm, each sound a gentle nudge toward sleep, ready to live a day as one of these traders. Let's step into their sandals. You're waking up before dawn in Timbuktu, the air cool and heavy with the promise of another scorching day. You're no longer just a visitor, you're living as a Mali trader, your hands already dusty from handling raffia beans and gold. Your day's work is all about hauling goods, striking deals, and keeping your wits sharp in the market's chaos. It's a grind slow and deliberate, with a rhythm that feels like a gentle sway perfect for easing you into a sleepy haze. In the 14th century Mali Empire, traders were the backbone of wealth, moving gold and salt across vast networks, as noted in chronicles like the Tariq al-Fatish. You start your day loading a donkey with leather pouches, gold dust in one raffia beans in another. You trudge to the market, the pre-dawn streets quiet, except for the soft clop of hooves and a distant rooster. Setting up your stall, you arrange your scale beans and gold with care like setting a chessboard. Customers arrive as the sun rises, and you're weighing gold for a Berber merchant, dropping beans one by one, clink, clink, until the scale balances. It's meditative, like stacking coins to pass the time. Here's the quirky bit. Some traders chewed raffia palm leaves during long deals, claiming it kept them alert. Historians still argue whether this was a mild stimulant or just a placebo habit. Imagine popping gum to survive a board meeting. You try a leaf, it's bitter, and you spit it out, earning a chuckle from a nearby vendor. You're not cut out for this, clearly, but the routine's soothing way haggle, nod, repeat. By noon, the heat's brutal, and you're fanning yourself with a cloth, dreaming of shade. A kid tries to swipe a bean from your pile, and you shoo him off with a mock scowl, little rascal. The market's buzzing now, but those beans keep you grounded, their steady clinks a lullaby in the chaos. Remember the parrots squawking trade calls, ones nearby mimicking your haggling, and you can't help but grin. You're sinking into the trader's life, each deal pulling you closer to sleep. Want to see how gold tied into Molly's spiritual side? Let's keep going. You're slipping away from Timbuktu's noisy market, now your trader's sandals heavy with dust as you head toward a quieter part of the city. The sun's dipping, casting a warm glow over mud brick mosques, and you're drawn to a small courtyard where a griot strums a kora, its notes soft like a bedtime melody. You're here to explore how gold weighed with those raffia beans wasn't just money in the Mali Empire. It held a sacred place in rituals and beliefs, tying the earthly to the divine. The air smells of incense, and the scene's so calm, it's practically pulling you under. In the 14th century, gold was a spiritual cornerstone in Mali, seen as a gift from the gods, according to oral traditions recorded in later texts like the Epic of Sundiata. You're watching a ceremony where a priest sprinkles gold dust, carefully weighed with beans, onto an altar, an offering for prosperity. The crowd's hushed, their eyes fixed on the shimmering pile, and you feel the weight of their reverence. Gold adorned sacred objects from amulets to the staffs of village elders, each piece a prayer in solid form. You're tempted to touch a gilded shrine, but a stern glance from an elder says, "Hands off, newbie." Here's the quirky tidbit. Some priests mixed gold dust with honey for sacred elixirs believed to cure ailments. Historians still argue whether this was spiritual symbolism or a placebo with a fancy price tag. Imagine chugging a $500 smoothie for good vibes. You chuckle, picturing a modern influencer hawking gold-infused kombucha. The ritual's slow pace, though, is soothing. The priest's chants, the kora's twang, the faint clink of beans as offerings are weighed. You sit cross-legged, the ground cool beneath you, and notice a kid staring, probably wondering why you look so out of place. Those raffia beans, remember them from the market. They're here too, ensuring even sacred gold is measured just right. The courtyard's peace wraps around you, each note and gesture, a gentle nudge toward sleep. Ready to learn some merchant tricks with those beans. Let's head back to the stalls. You're back in Timbuktu's market, the morning sun already baking the sand under your sandals. The air's alive with the chatter of traders and the scent of roasted peanuts, and you're sidling up to a seasoned merchant, his hands moving like a magician's as he weighs gold with raffia beans. You're here to uncover the clever tricks these traders used to make their bean weighing system foolproof, or at least close enough to keep deals fair. It's a meticulous craft, each clink of a bean on the scale pulling you deeper into the market's sleepy rhythm. In the Mali Empire's 14th century trade hubs, precision was everything gold was too valuable for sloppy measurements. Merchants, as noted in accounts like those of al-Umari, mastered the raffia bean system through years of practice, turning it into an art form. You watch your merchant calibrate his scale with a tiny stone, then drop beans one by one, each seed a known weight, to balance a pinch of gold dust. He's got a knack for spotting uneven beans, tossing out any that look too big or small. You try mimicking him, but your clumsy fingers fumble a bean and it rolls into the dirt. He smirks. Yep, you're not ready for the big leagues. Here's the quirky bit. Some traders marked their best beans with tiny scratches, claiming it locked in their accuracy. Historians still argue whether this was a practical sorting trick or pure superstition, like labeling your lucky socks for game day. You grin, imagining a merchant fussing over his special beans while rivals snicker. Another trick they'd blow gently on the scale to settle the gold dust evenly, a move so subtle it's almost hypnotic. You give it a try, puffing like you're blowing out a candle, and earn a nod of approval, small victories. A camel grunts nearby, nearly knocking over a stall, and you dodge just in time. Those beans, like the ones you saw in the sacred rituals, keep the market's pulse steady. Their soft clinks are your anchor, blending with the hum of voices. You're sinking into the trader's world, each careful way, a step closer to sleep. Want to face the dangers of the trade routes next? Let's hit the trail. You're leaving Timbuktu behind now, your sandals sinking into the hot sand of a Saharan trade route. The sun's a merciless blaze overhead, and you're trudging alongside a caravan camels swaying under loads of gold and salt. Those raffia beans tucked in pouches are still the trader's lifeline, but out here you're learning the hard way that the journey to weigh gold is fraught with dangers. The desert's vast quiet hum is oddly soothing, like a fan on low, but the risks make your heart skip perfect for sinking into a story that's half adventure, half lullaby. The Mali Empire's trade routes, vital in the 14th century, stretched thousands of miles, connecting Timbuktu to cities like Gao and Sijil Massa, as documented by travelers like Ibn Battuta. You're clutching a water skin, its contents warm and gritty, as you scan the horizon for trouble. Bandits were a real threat. Tribes like the Sanhaja occasionally raided caravans, snatching gold before it could be weighed. You grip your staff tighter, imagining a shadowy figure eyeing your caravan's pouches. Then there's the weather. Sandstorms could bury you in minutes, and you're squinting at a distant haze, hoping it's just heat shimmer, not a storm brewing. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some traders tied bones to their camels, believing the rattling scared off bandits, or maybe spirits. Historians still argue whether this was practical or pure desert folklore. Picture dangling wind chimes to fend off robbers. You chuckle, but the sound of those bones clattering in the wind is weirdly calming, mixing with the camel's grunts. You're parched, your throat begging for more than a sip of that sandy water. A trader offers you a dried date. It's chewy sweet, and you're grateful, though you'd kill for a cold soda. Those raffia beans, like the ones you saw in Timbuktu's market, are still here jingling in pouches. They're a small comfort, a reminder of order amid this chaos. The caravan's rhythm step, sway clatter, pulls you deeper, each sound nudging you toward sleep. Remember the merchant's tricks with scratched beans? Out here, they're guarding those pouches like gold itself, ready to meet some unexpected players in this trade game. Let's keep moving. You're back in Timbuktu's bustling market, the sun climbing high, baking the sand beneath your sandals. The air hums with haggling and the scent of dried herbs, but your eyes are drawn to a group of women, traders, their vibrant head wraps standing out in the crowd. You're here to meet the unsung heroines of Mali's gold trade women who defied norms to weigh gold with those raffia beans carving their own space in this male-dominated world. Their steady voices and clinking scales weave a rhythm that's as soothing as a gentle breeze, perfect for drifting off. In the 14th century Mali Empire, women were rarely visible in trade, but oral histories like those preserved by griots highlight their roles as merchants and brokers, especially in local markets. You're watching a woman named Awa, let's call her that, sorting beans with expert precision, her scale balancing gold dust for a skeptical buyer. She's sharp, tossing back witty retorts while dropping beans clink clink like it's second nature. Women like her often traded gold cloth or spices, using their profits to support families or even fund scholars in Timbuktu's famous schools. You're impressed, but trying to keep up with her banter feels like chasing a runaway camel. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some women hid extra beans in their head wraps, pulling them out mid-deal to throw off rivals' counts. Historians still argue whether this was clever strategy or just market gossip. Imagine pulling a pear quarter from your hat during a poker game. You grin, picturing Awa smirking as she outsmarts a cocky trader. Her hands move steadily, the beans' soft clinks blending with the market's hum, and you're tempted to ask for a lesson, but her no-nonsense glance says you'd better not interrupt. A kid bumps into you, nearly spilling your imaginary water skin, clumsy, move you. Those raffia beans, like the ones you saw on the trade routes, are Awa's lifeline, ensuring every deal is fair. The market's chaos feels softer now, her calm focus wrapping you like a blanket. You're sinking deeper, each clink a nudge toward sleep. Want to see how Mali's beans stacked up against other measures? Let's step back and compare. You're stepping back from Timbuktu's lively market, the hum of traders fading as you find a shady spot under an acacia tree. The air's cooler here, carrying the faint scent of dry earth, and you're clutching a handful of raffia beans, their smooth surfaces oddly comforting. You're about to compare Mali's quirky bean weighing system to other ancient methods of measurement, a nerdy dive into how people ensured fair trade before digital scales existed. It's a slow, meticulous topic, like counting stars, perfect for easing you into a drowsy calm. In the 14th century Mali Empire, raffia beans were the gold standard for weighing gold, as noted in texts like the Tariq al-Sudan, offering a lightweight, portable solution. You're picturing a Mali trader dropping beans each about 0.05 grams onto a scale, but elsewhere, others had their own tricks. In ancient Egypt, they used stone weights shaped like beetles. In Mesopotamia, barley grains did the job. You try balancing a few beans in your palm, imagining an Egyptian merchant scoffing at your seeds while proudly showing off his polished stones. Mali's system was simpler, though beans were abundant, unlike carved stones, but you wonder if they were as reliable. It's like choosing between a ruler and a tape measure. Both work, but one's got more charm. Here's the quirky bit. Some Mali traders claimed their beans were blessed by river spirits, giving them an edge over foreign weights. Historians still argue whether this was a marketing ploy or genuine belief. Imagine bragging your scales got divine Wi-Fi. You chuckle, picturing a trader hyping his beans like they're organic, free-range, and gluten-free. You toss a bean up and catch it, feeling the weight of history in its tiny form. Other cultures' methods, like China's bronze weights, were heavier, less portable, but Mali's beans let traders roam light a practical edge in the desert. A stray goat nibbles at your sandal, snapping you back rude, but you're too relaxed to care. Those raffia beans, like the ones Awa used in the market, tie this all together, their soft clinks echoing in your mind. You're sinking into the comparison, each fact, a gentle nudge toward sleep, ready to see how Mali's gold reached far-off lands. Let's follow its trail. You're standing at the edge of Timbuktu, the desert stretching endlessly before you, a faint breeze carrying the scent of sand and distant spices. The sun's low, painting the dunes gold, and you're imagining the journey of Mali's gold dust weighed with those raffia beans as it travels far beyond the Sahara to glittering courts in distant lands. It's a slow, sprawling story of wealth and connection, the kind that wraps you in its rhythm, like a soft blanket, nudging you closer to sleep. In the 14th century, Mali's gold was a global superstar, fueling economies from North Africa to Europe and the Middle East, as chronicled by travelers like Ibn Battuta. You picture caravans leaving Timbuktu, camels laden with gold dust, each pinch carefully weighed with beans, bound for Sijil Masa, then shipped to Cairo or Damascus. From there, it reached medieval Europe, where Mali's gold adorned Venetian coins and royal crowns. You're trailing one such caravan, the camel's bells jingling faintly, and you can almost see the gold sparkling in a Genoese merchant's hands, thousands of miles away. It's wild to think your little beans helped fund castles and cathedrals across continents. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some European traders unfamiliar with Mali's beans thought they were magic charms, not weights. Historians still argue whether this was cultural ignorance or Mali merchants spinning tales to inflate prices. Imagine selling your kitchen scale as a wizard's tool. You smirk, picturing a confused Italian noble sniffing a raffia bean like it's fine wine. The gold's journey wasn't just trade, it was a cultural bridge carrying Mali's influence to far-off courts while bringing back exotic goods like silk and glass. You stumble over a rock, nearly dropping your imaginary water skin, clumsy, but the desert's forgiving today. Those beans, like the ones you saw in Timbuktu's market, were the unsung heroes, ensuring every grain of gold was accounted for. The caravan's rhythm step, Jingle Creek, feels like a lullaby, now pulling you deeper into the story. want to reflect on the fading legacy of these beans. Let's wind down with their final chapter. You're back in Timbuktu, but the market's quieter. Now the sun sinking below the horizon, casting a soft amber glow over the mud brick stalls. You're sitting on a woven mat, the faint clink of raffia beans in a nearby trader's pouch, blending with the evening's calm. You're here to reflect on the fading legacy of Mali's bean-weighing tradition, a once vital system that tied an empire together but slowly slipped into history's shadows. The air's cooling, the world slowing, and each thought feels like a gentle wave lapping you closer to sleep. In the Mali Empire's 14th century heyday, raffia beans were the unsung heroes of trade, as noted in chronicles like the Tariq al-Sudan, ensuring gold deals were fair from Timbuktu to distant markets. You picture a trader, his scale now stilled, passing his bean pouch to his son, hoping the tradition endures. But by the 16th century, as empires like Songhai rose and European scales arrived, beans began to fade, replaced by metal weights and new trade systems. You run your fingers through the sand, imagining buried beans, each one a tiny relic of Mali's golden age. It's not sad, just quiet, like a story told one last time. Here's the quirky bit. Some modern Malian farmers still keep raffia beans as good luck charms, not weights. Historians still argue whether this echoes ancient reverence or just nostalgic habit. Imagine keeping an old calculator for sentiment, not math. You smile, picturing a farmer tucking a bean into his pocket, whispering a wish. The tradition's legacy lingers in stories, in the griots' songs, their voices carrying Mali's past like a soft hum through the ages. You lean back the mat, cool beneath you, and a distant chora's notes drift over each pluck, a gentle pull toward rest. Those beans from the market to the trade routes tied this journey together, their clinks a thread in your mind. The stars are peeking out now, faint, against the dusk, and you feel the world softening, the edges blurring. Wind down, the market's gone silent, Timbuktu's streets empty under a blanket of stars. You're lying on that mat. The desert's cool breath brushing your skin, the faint scent of dust and palm lingering. The raffia beans, once the pulse of Mali's wealth, rest quietly in history, their story fading like a whisper on the wind. You don't need to count them anymore. Their rhythms in your breath, slow and steady, each inhale pulling you deeper into calm. The camels are stilled, the traders asleep, and the gold's glow has softened to a memory. Let the chora's notes carry you now, their gentle plucks like ripples on a quiet lake. The Sahara stretches wide, but it's soft, endless, cradling you in its vastness. Close your eyes, let the stars fade and drift where the desert's hum takes you. Sleep's waiting warm and patient, just beyond the next breath. Hey guys, tonight we're going back to the 16th century, not to witness a war, not to eavesdrop on political intrigue, but to take in the soft waft of rose oil drifting through a sun-drenched courtyard in Istanbul. You're standing at the threshold of Topkapi Palace, where marble tiles reflect the morning light and faint sandalwood smoke curls from an incense brazier. The scent clings to everything, velvet cushions, golden drapes, even the hems of a passing servant's caftan. This isn't just any day at court. This is the daily reality of an Ottoman sultan who, for all his political power and military ambition, really just wanted everything to smell fantastic. Now, you probably won't survive this palace in real life. Too many rules, too many people with sharp, curved swords, and one wrong comment about cinnamon, and you're out. Literally. But here from the safety of your bed, all you need to do is breathe in, exhale, and relax into the sweet absurdity of a ruler who built an entire perfume empire from his palace bedroom. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it where you are? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk slowly through the sun-drenched gardens, just beyond the harem walls, bare feet brushing the cool flagstones. You pass attendants whispering under their breath, and every few steps the air changes a breeze of cardamom, then clove, then something sweet and sharp, maybe ambergris, but no one's entirely sure. This place doesn't just smell good, it smells intentional. That's the thing about the Ottoman court under Sultan Selim II, the so-called Perfume Sultan, although that nickname was never written in official records. Probably because Sultan Selim, commander of the faithful in sense, didn't quite carry the gravitas needed for military campaigns. Selim wasn't meant to rule. He was the third son, born under less than fortunate stars, and preferred studying poetry to wielding scimitars. But fate and a few tragic accidents involving his brothers nudged him forward. And when he finally took the throne, he brought with him one peculiar obsession scent. Now don't get the wrong idea, perfume wasn't some quirky side hobby. It was essential. The Prophet Muhammad was said to love musk and rose water. Cleanliness and fragrance were spiritual as well as social. But Selim, he took it to new levels. Historians still argue whether he actually created formulas himself or just commissioned them, but palace diaries and merchant records suggest the Sultan's personal involvement went way beyond just sniffing and approving. There's a record scribbled by an exhausted court steward of Selim requesting 37-cent trials in a single afternoon. By attempt number 12, the steward allegedly lost the ability to distinguish vanilla from vinegar and nearly fainted into a pile of crushed myrrh. You wind through the tiled halls, where walls are hand-painted with tulips and arabesques. The palace itself is designed to move scent. Courtyards funnel air toward interior rooms. Latticed windows let in breeze, but filter out harsh smells from the city outside. And tucked behind an arch, you find it the Sultan's private perfumery. No guards stand watch. Just a small blue door, almost hidden, and from within a whisper of rose bergamot and something floral you can't name. Yet, inside it's quiet. Rows of copper stills line the walls, not for alcohol but for distillation. Glass bottles shimmer in the lamplight, each one labeled in perfect Arabic calligraphy. Morning garden, moon over Damascus, the quiet wife. You spot a large leather-bound notebook on a cedar desk. The Sultan's notes, perhaps. No title, but the pages are filled with scent trials, doodles of plants, and what might be a love poem comparing a courtesan to a cinnamon branch. One scholar claimed Selim once banned anyone in the court from using civet musk after a failed blend made the Grand Vizier sneeze for 6 hours. Another theory is that he created a rotating weekly scent calendar so that each day of the week had its own olfactory profile. Monday, jasmine and cedar. Tuesday, fig leaf and orange blossom. Wednesday, mint and white musk. And so on until Sunday was supposedly oud and regret, whatever that smelled like. Historians still debate whether the system actually existed or whether it was just a tale passed down from weary servants desperate for structure in a deeply aromatic life. But one thing's certain, you can't escape the influence of scent here. Servants lightly dust rugs with powdered clove before guests arrive. Ink used in the Sultan's correspondence is infused with rose oil, so every decree arrives smelling like diplomacy. Even the palace cats wear tiny collars dabbed with bergamot oil, making them the best-smelling threats to palace mice in all of Istanbul. Your nose twitches. It's not unpleasant, just a lot. Still, the overall effect is calming, like the scent version of a lullaby hummed through sandalwood smoke. Outside, a flute begins to play. Not a grand ceremony, just a musician practicing in the courtyard. The tune meanders like perfume, drifting on the breeze, looping and curling in on itself. You sit cross-legged on a silk cushion and close your eyes. In this world, the greatest power isn't the sword or the seal, it's the nose. And here, your nose has never had so much to do. You wake up in the middle of the palace library, or at least it feels like it. The scent of lavender, scrolls, and ink still lingers in your nostrils as a courtier silently guides you down a marble hallway lit by flickering oil lamps. You're not in trouble. This is just how everyone moves here. Quiet, barefoot, semi-glowing in the lamplight, like you're part of a fragrance ad designed in the 1500s. At the end of the hallway is a room not marked on any floor plan, known among insiders as the Rose Chamber. It's said to be where Sultan Selim first developed what would later become his obsession, his compulsion with scent. Not with the smell of conquest or the musk of victory, but with roses. Thousands of them, pressed, steeped, boiled, powdered, and on one particularly reckless day, eaten. You cross the threshold, and your nose is immediately wrapped in the dense sweetness of rose absolute. Not the fake floral stuff either. This is rich, sticky, almost syrupy rose, like someone tried to bottle the feeling of being serenaded under a Turkish sky. Legend has it that the young Sultan, then just Prince Selim, once tried to impress a visiting dignitary by dousing himself in freshly crushed petals. The dignitary sneezed for an hour and passed out. Powerful stuff, he reportedly muttered upon waking. Historians still argue whether this story is exaggerated or whether the petals had been soaking in an attar oil for too long. As a child, Selim had what the palace healers called an overactive olfactory temperament. It wasn't an insult, it was more like an affectionate complaint. The boy could identify spices blindfolded and once noticed that his tutor's robe smelled slightly different on Wednesdays. New soap, the man confessed, sweating. While other boys trained in horseback riding and swordplay, Salim begged to wander the gardens. He'd bury his nose in hyacinths and talk to the gardeners about soil acidity and pollination cycles. There are records, beautifully illustrated ones, of the young prince drawing cross sections of lemons just to understand their zest to pulp ratio for potential scent layering. Eventually, Salim's tutors gave up on traditional lessons and redirected his energy. One physician introduced him to Tib-e-Nefsani, the medicinal philosophy that linked emotional well-being with fragrance. A theory that a person's mood could be balanced by inhaling specific smells, lavender for calm time, for clarity, bitter orange for heartbreak. Modern scientists might scoff, but honestly, if you've ever lit a eucalyptus candle while doing your taxes, you've dabbled in Ottoman aromatherapy. At 17, Salim began assembling his first private scent journal. Though it doesn't survive today, a partial copy was preserved in the form of marginalia, scribbled inside an old Quran by one of his physicians. It's here that we first see the term layering of memory, referring to his belief that every major life moment should be paired with a unique scent. He allegedly wore a custom blend of saffron rose and burnt orange when meeting his future wife for the first time. Later, he'd call it the smell of courage and regret. By the time he came of age, Salim wasn't just collecting perfumes, he was directing their production. Court records list at least 9 full-time perfumers on staff by the time he was 25, not including the scent apprentices responsible for crushing, measuring, and occasionally fainting from inhaling too much clove. And it wasn't all roses and saffron. One of his earliest experiments involved blending fresh mint leaves with frankincense and sea salt. Historians still argue whether this was meant to evoke summer coastal memories, or whether the Sultan just really liked minty incense. You move deeper into the rose chamber. Against one wall stands a marble basin once used for floral distillations. Steam still curls faintly from its rim. A soft clinking sound draws your attention. A servant places a new vial on the table. Clear glass, thick golden liquid. You lift the stopper and inhale. Rose certainly, but with a shadow of vetiver and perhaps a whisper of cedar. Complex, regal, sad somehow. You place it back carefully. In this world, breaking a perfume bottle might be considered an act of war, or at the very least, a very awkward dinner. Outside, you hear the distant flapping of pigeons, carrier birds, returning from the provinces. They're greeted not with grain, but with a dab of lavender oil rubbed onto their feathers to calm them from the journey. Did it work? No one's sure, but it made the palace smell divine. As you wander back into the hallway, past the low-hanging jasmine vines and trays of crushed herbs, you begin to realize this palace isn't just a place of politics and power. It's a bottle, a living, breathing bottle designed to contain memory, mood, and musk. And you're floating through it like a note in a very long, very luxurious symphony of scent. You drift through the outer gardens now, where the morning sun glints off dew-soaked petals like glass beads. The fragrance here isn't just background, it's overwhelming, like walking through a soft, focused dream that smells faintly of warm lemons and flowering thyme. The Garden of 10,000 Petals. They call it, though, the official name is more poetic, and harder to pronounce if you haven't had your morning coffee. It's not an exaggeration. Ottoman records and some grumpy gardener's ledgers indicate that over 10,000 varieties of aromatic plants were cultivated here during Sultan Selim's reign. Roses, of course, dominated, but there were also irises, violets, carnations, bitter oranges, bergamot trees, and tiny yellow blossoms imported from far-off Yemen that released their scent only at midnight. Because why not? You tiptoe between rose bushes, with stems thick as forearms, and petals so soft they make your socks jealous. These weren't just decorative, they were functional. The petals were plucked before sunrise, before the sun's heat could draw out their essential oils. Dozens of palace workers did this every morning, yawning into their baskets as they plucked for the Sultan's personal perfume stash. Historians still argue whether these flowers were hybridized specifically for the Sultan's preferences. Some believe he commissioned botanical experiments to create bolder colors and richer scents. Others think the climate and sheer volume of compost, mostly from palace kitchens and rather disturbingly bird droppings, did the heavy lifting. A sweet fragrance tickles your nose as you pass rows of lemon verbena and saffron crocuses. You pause to admire a bush of something you can't name, silver leaves with a waxy sheen, possibly myrtle, maybe a now extinct species. There are sketches of this plant in a faded journal in the Topkapi archives labeled simply as Selim's secret favorite, intriguing. The garden isn't quiet. Birds chatter from latticed trellises. Bees hum aggressively around hibiscus. Occasionally, a eunuch coughs discreetly as he sidesteps a flower bed, probably recalling the time he accidentally stepped on a rare tulip and had to write a 5-page apology poem. And yet, despite all the scent and activity, the place still manages to soothe you. This is no accident. Selim was obsessed with creating harmony between color, scent, sound, and even temperature. Garden paths were shaded just enough to keep you cool. Water channels ran alongside walkways, not just for irrigation, but for the soft trickling sound. The Sultan believed walking should feel like a lullaby. There's a story less verified, more whispered, that Selim once arranged a moonlight tour of the garden for his guests, just to showcase a new night-blooming jasmine he'd acquired from India. Guests were instructed to remain silent as they walked, listening to frogs and inhaling the perfume of unseen flowers. It was allegedly the quietest dinner party in history. At the center of the garden lies a small domed structure, the distillation house. From the outside, it looks like a tiny mosque. Inside, though, it's packed with copper alembics, glass funnels, and coiled pipes, an early perfumer's lab. This is where petals became oil, and oil became power. You crouch beside a steaming cauldron, still warm from a sunrise batch. Petals swirl lazily inside, releasing their oils into the bath. An old man stirs with a stick and nods at you. He doesn't speak, but his eyes suggest you're welcome to watch as long as you don't sneeze on the product. In here, they used methods passed down from Arabic alchemists, Greek physicians, and Persian perfumers. Rose water was made through steam distillation. Musk had to be dissolved in alcohol when they could get it. Ambergris, the rarest of all, was collected only when it washed ashore like sea-born treasure. There's still debate over whether Selim ever obtained true ambergris, or whether he was duped by a very confident sailor and a whale-shaped chunk of wax. One ledger notes a recipe labeled simply Sultan's Afternoon. It includes rose cedar green fig and something smudged that may or may not be catnip. Was it a midday perfume, a leisure scent, a prototype? No one knows. All we know is that Selim insisted it be applied to every window curtain in the harem at precisely 300 p.m. daily. Why, a vizier reportedly asked. To remind them of the outside world, the Sultan said. Even the ones who've never been outside, especially them. Outside, a sudden gust carries the scent of crushed violets your way. You breathe it in. It's subtle, like memory, which in this garden was probably the point. You recline on a low bench under an orange tree, lulled by the rustling leaves and the ever-present symphony of floral notes. The sun is warm, but not too warm. The breeze is cool, but not too cool. And around you, the air itself is art. You're not just a visitor here, you're an ingredient folded gently into the Sultan's aromatic masterpiece. You're led from the gardens by a silent servant in embroidered slippers who somehow glides without rustling a single leaf or dropping a single jasmine blossom clinging to his shoulder. Your next stop smells a little less floral and a lot more suspicious, because behind every rose petal in the palace lies a rumor, and behind every perfume bottle at least one political agenda. Welcome to the place where scent and secrets collided the perfumer's quarter of the inner court. This is not the kind of workshop you'd expect in a royal setting. There's no gold, no mosaic domes, no lounging poets writing odes to bergamot. It's all slate floors, high windows, and long tables cluttered with alembics, dried herbs, sealed vials, and unexpectedly, a half-dissected pomegranate. The head perfumer, a man named Eunice, at least that's what the footnotes say, was not just a master of scent. He was, if you believe the journals of one paranoid janissary, also a palace spy. And he wasn't alone. You see, in the labyrinthine world of the Ottoman court, where eunuchs, scribes, cooks, and astrologers all jostled for favor scent, offered a unique kind of power. A misplaced musk could cause gossip. A cloying fragrance might signal betrayal. If you knew what someone smelled like, you knew where they had been, who they had been near, and perhaps what they were hiding. So yes, perfumers sometimes dabbled in intelligence gathering. Historians still argue whether this practice was officially sanctioned or simply a clever job perk. Some claim the Perfumers Guild kept scent logs for key figures in the palace, tracking everything from sweat composition. Too much garlic might indicate stress to new cologne blends, a little extra oud, trying to impress someone. Others dismiss this as courtly paranoia. After all, how much can one really learn from someone's choice of hand balm? But walk through this lab and you'll start to wonder. Over here, dried rose petals sorted by shade, light pink for the concubines, deep crimson for the viziers. Over there, a cabinet labeled emissary protocols containing vials for every ambassador to ensure diplomatic visits were greeted with culturally appropriate fragrance. Mint for the Venetians, pine resin for the Circassians, and something ambiguous called silk rain for the Mongols. There's even a dusty scroll labeled Operation Cinnamon. No one knows what it means. Some say it was the code name for a plot to poison a rival with overly spicy incense. Others claim it was just a failed attempt at a festive winter scent. You pause at a table covered in broken glass stoppers and burnt herbs. A small note is pinned to a corkboard. Never again civet plus onion equals disaster. In the corner, two junior perfumers are grinding resins with what looks suspiciously like side-eye. They stop when you pass bow slightly, then continue with exaggerated care. One is sniffing a strip of paper. The other is making notes in shorthand that looks more like spy code than anything scent-related. Salim, of course, claimed to be above all of this. He insisted his interest in scent was purely aesthetic, but letters between court scribes suggest he was briefed regularly on who wore what. There's even an alleged instance where a sudden shift in a vizier's sandalwood blend triggered a full-scale investigation. Turns out he'd just run out of his usual stock. But still, once your perfume is in the royal registry, deviation is suspect. One palace steward wrote, "We fear a change in fragrance more than a change in fortune." He was later reassigned to the laundry wing, where ironically, he ended up inventing a method of scenting towels that is still in use today. Talk about career pivots. You wander past a series of small alcoves, each containing a single scent experiment sealed behind glass. These were part of Salim's notorious sensory archive, a collection of blends too powerful, too emotional, or just too weird to be released into regular circulation. One is labeled Anxiety Before War, a sharp blend of iron smoke and dried fig that reportedly made 3 advisors cry. Another is titled The Morning After a Feast and is said to smell of cumin wine dregs and faint remorse. Not all the scents were dark, though. A series of cheerful blends, known as the Hammam Six, featured clean linen orange blossom and what one eunuch described as the smell of getting exactly what you asked for in life. That eunuch later wrote a scroll-long essay praising the emotional benefits of vanilla. You pause in front of a locked cabinet sealed with wax, no label, no key. Only a faint inscription in gold, too honest. No one has opened it since Salim's time. Maybe it was a perfume that revealed secrets. Or maybe it just smelled like onions again. Even in this murky world of scent and schemes, the artistry remains. Every bottle, every scrap of scroll, every powdered herb is a brushstroke in a masterpiece you can't quite see, but you can definitely smell. You exit the workshop with your head spinning slightly, not from intrigue, but from the layers upon layers of scent that still cling to your skin. A blend of myrrh, suspicion, and maybe just a dash of cumin. By now, your nose has become a connoisseur, flaring slightly at cinnamon, sighing at sandalwood, raising a sleepy eyebrow at patchouli. But nothing quite prepares you for what lies ahead, because now you're going to war. Well, not literally. You're still safe in your imagination/dream sequence, but you're following the Sultan as he marches into battle, not with sharpened blades, but with velvet-lined satchels filled with perfume flasks. Yes, That's right. Sultan Selim II, ruler of one of the most powerful empires on earth, never left for a campaign without a curated selection of scents. Some emperors brought maps, others brought royal mascots. Selim brought lavender. His reasoning apparently was strategic. Fragrance, he believed, steadied the spirit and masked the less fragrant realities of life on the march. Think about it. Horses, leather armor, iron cooking pots, and 40,000 humans wearing the same wool robes for 3 weeks. You'd want a dab of neroli behind the ears, too. Contemporary sources, even rival diplomats, mention the strange cloud of scent that preceded Selim's camp like an invisible honor guard. Some likened it to a garden walking on the wind. Others were less kind, calling it the world's most expensive distraction. Historians still argue whether these reports are accurate or just exaggerations from mildly jealous Phoenician scribes. But there's at least one confirmed entry in the war journal of a Janissary commander that reads, "His Majesty smells of burning pine, and I am comforted." It wasn't just for comfort, though. Selim used scent as a subtle, psychological weapon. Before major confrontations, his tent would emit specific blends designed to provoke unease or nostalgia or both. One popular battlefield blend included frankincense to recall funerals, mint for childhood memories, and a sharp citrus top note to awaken the senses. If that sounds manipulative, well, it was, but effective. You march now with the column. Dust kicks up around your sandals. The sun beats down like it's auditioning for a dramatic role, and yet no stench, no foulness, just the crisp air of mountain myrtle and the slow sweetness of marjoram. You're in a traveling cloud of curated calm. Soldiers even had designated scent marshals in the court caravan. Their job to ensure the fragrances remained fresh, balanced, and did not clash with the incense being burned in the mobile prayer tents. Yes, really. There's one documented incident from the Persian front where an entire division had to pause while their musk flasks were replaced due to cloying undertones. No casualties, except for the perfumer's pride. But not everyone was a fan. One Ottoman general reportedly grumbled if the Sultan spent less time perfuming the tents and more time inspecting the artillery, we might have taken that hill faster. He was later gifted a vial of ylang-ylang and reassigned to logistics. And then, of course, there's the matter of the battlefield flasks. Selim carried a small engraved silver case containing his combat trio rosewater to calm camphor, to invigorate, and blackcurrant leaf to remind him of the palace gardens. He would dab his temples before strategy meetings. Some said he could remember troop placements better by associating units with scents, like, ah yes, lavender. Flank, those are the cavalry. It sounds absurd until you realize how many generals have used chess pieces or colored ribbons to do the same thing. Selim just did it while smelling really, really good. You pass a tent where officers are gathered, hunched over a map, dusted with clove powder to keep bugs away and possibly to make the overall mood slightly more agreeable. You step inside the command tent. It's shadowed and cool. On a shelf is a vial labeled simply Retreat, an apothecary's blend of myrtle basil and cedarwood, calm, grounding, and a little sad. Used rarely, but always ready. One scholar, more poet than historian, if we're being honest, wrote that the Sultan fought with scent, the way the others fought with steel, directly, subtly, and without remorse. It's dramatic. But when you see how soldiers light incense before breaking camp, and how campfires are sprinkled with rose dust, you start to believe it. Even the war horses, by the way, were dabbed with scent. Just a touch on the bridle to mask fear and keep the animals calm. A groom once complained that a stallion wouldn't respond unless perfumed first. You laugh, but hey, it worked. As dusk falls, you ride with the rear guard under a sky bruised with violet clouds. The camp behind you smells like lemongrass and slow-burning oud. Fires flicker, soldiers pray. The scent of a traveling empire curls into the wind, and as you fall asleep beside the faint warmth of a field stove, you realize that this is not an empire of force alone. It's an empire that smells like victory. Morning again. This time, steam clouds the air around you thick with eucalyptus and bergamot. You're in the hammam now, the Ottoman bathhouse, where sweat, steam, and scent swirl into something ritualistic sacred and slightly slippery underfoot. The hammam was no ordinary spa day. In the Ottoman world, these places were where politics, romance, and hygiene converged under domed ceilings and fragrant mist. For Sultan Selim II, they were also an aromatic playground. You step into the caldarium, the hottest room in the hammam. The tiles are so polished they almost shimmer. Water runs in small channels along the base of the walls, its burbling sound amplified by the acoustics of the dome. Someone hums a lullaby in the next chamber. The air smells of orange peel and sandalwood, with a hint of mint rising from a basin of steeped leaves. Selim didn't invent the hammam. These public baths had been part of Turkish and Islamic culture for centuries, but he elevated the olfactory experience to new heights. Under his watch, the imperial hammam became a fragrant theater, and every performance required a new scent. He personally commissioned custom soap blends for different moods, rose and milk for reflection, thyme and black pepper for mental clarity, and a particularly curious one, pomegranate rind and sea salt for vigorous contemplation, whatever that means. Historians still argue whether that was meant to stimulate thought or just exfoliate really aggressively. A row of attendants waits quietly by the stone benches. One offers you a soft towel infused with ambergris. Another pours rose water over your hands as if you were a visiting prince. The towels here are not mere fabric, they're scent delivery systems. Every fold carries a whisper of bergamot, every corner a trace of violet. You half expect the towels to speak, and while it might sound indulgent, scent played a genuine role in these bath rituals. Cleanliness was deeply connected to spirituality. To purify the body was to purify the soul, and adding layers of carefully selected fragrances was in a way preparing for a higher state of being, or at least preparing to walk down a palace corridor without offending someone's nostrils. Selim reportedly took hammam sessions very seriously. He scheduled them multiple times a week each, with a different fragrance theme. The Wednesday blend lavender lemon balm and something mysterious called green fig dusk. Scholars guess that it was either a rare leaf extract or a poetic mistranslation for something that no longer exists. The perfumers treated the hammam like a lab. Fragrance behaved differently in steam. Notes that were too subtle in dry air became bolder, richer, more aggressive. Others melted away, leaving behind only a ghost of their true selves. The Sultan's favorite experiment, layering scents through steam cycles. Here's how it worked. First, a rinse with mint and vetiver, then a scrub with orange blossom paste, followed by a steam infusion of cardamom and juniper, and finally, a splash of rose vinegar to close the pores. It was said that after these sessions, the Sultan didn't just smell clean, he smelled deliberate. You lie back on a warm marble slab, watching condensation drip from the dome like slow-motion rain. Two attendants chat quietly in the next room about the latest failed attempt at inventing jasmine soap that didn't stain linens. You learn that there was actually a chief hammam nose, a designated official who had to test each soap and steam blend before it was allowed into the Sultan's routine. They sniffed towels, they wafted vapor, they once fainted after an overly ambitious patchouli experiment. And in a move that would make modern spa-goers weep with envy, there were even scented pebbles imported from the East. When heated, they released a soft aroma, usually almond or frankincense. One chronicler described them as tiny scent grenades of joy. You sit quietly, breathing in the thick warmth, letting the various layers of steam perfume settle on your skin. Somewhere deep in the hammam, an attendant is chanting a lent of the day's approved oils like a liturgy. It's peaceful, but it is also powerful, because this too was politics. To control how you smelled was to control how others felt around you. Selim knew this. When he invited ambassadors to the hammam, not for negotiation, just for a refreshing rinse, he was sending a message, a scented one. You are welcome, the air would say, but you are not in control here. One letter from a Venetian diplomat mentions leaving the bathhouse feeling light, confused, and slightly addicted to bergamot, a win for Ottoman diplomacy. You close your eyes. Someone splashes warm water near your feet. You drift a little. The scent changes again, rosewood, and black tea maybe. Or perhaps your imagination is getting stronger. Either way, it's lovely. This is not just bathing, it's transformation. By scent, by steam, by silence. And as you slowly rise, wrapped in the softest towel you've ever encountered, you realize this here in the hammam. The Sultan was not a warrior nor a ruler. He was simply a man with extraordinary taste and a nose for serenity. You're back in the palace now, but not the parts open to diplomats or wandering poets. This place is quieter, cooler, tucked beneath the outer courtyards in a series of chambers that smell like cedarwood and faintly burnt sugar. You descend a stone stairwell lit by flickering lanterns. At the bottom, a brass-handled door slightly ajar. This is the Sultan's secret lab. Yes, the Sultan had a perfume lab, a private space where he could tinker with scents the way some rulers tinkered with maps or weaponry. Historians still argue whether Selim II actually created his own formulas or just watched over others while doing a lot of enthusiastic pointing. But one thing's clear, this was a man with opinions. And glassware. You step inside. The space is surprisingly modest, more practical than palatial. The walls are lined with shelves, holding bottles of resins, powdered roots, oils, thick and golden, and mysterious little packets labeled in faded ink. Some names are obvious: sandalwood, clove, jasmine. Others are cryptic. There's one labeled sleep wind. Another just says for arguments. The ceiling is low, and condensation beads on the brass fixtures from the heat of the stills. Copper alembics bubble gently in one corner, releasing tendrils of steam that smell like toasted saffron. On a central table, notes, diagrams, test strips, and believe it or not, a very alert ferret perched on a stool. Yes, the Sultan kept a ferret in his lab. His name, Citrus. Supposedly, Selim trained Citrus to respond to certain aromas by raising his tail or doing a spin. Historians still debate whether this was a serious experiment in animal scent cognition or just a bored monarch trying to turn his pet into a furry sommelier. Either way, there are doodles of Citrus in the margins of Selim's scent journals, usually sniffing a rose or looking deeply suspicious of a block of amber. You run your fingers along the edge of a glass vial filled with dark purple oil labeled simply for morning. Another in bright green reads court laughter. A third, unmarked, smells like pine needles and fresh bread. There's a moment where you question whether this one was even meant for perfume or just a snack gone wrong. It's in this room that Selim, or his team of devoted perfumers, developed some of his strangest and most ambitious scent experiments. There's the Memory Series, a set of 7 oils meant to evoke stages of life from birth to old age. The birth scent is fresh and floral, the aging blend smoky with a little bit of dusty fig. Apparently, Selim would wear one every birthday just to see if he still liked the one from the year before. Often he didn't. Age smells different each time, he once wrote, usually fainter, sometimes better. One vial contains a scent meant to replicate the smell of snow falling on warm stone. Another, according to legend, was designed to mimic the air after a thunderstorm in Syria. Whether these experiments actually succeeded is another matter. One ambassador allegedly fainted after being exposed to rain of Damascus, describing it as the smell of being very politely scolded by God. There are also reports of a few missteps. One failed blend involving licorice root and boiled citrus peel was so pungent it had to be buried in the garden under a plum tree. The tree, they say, still blooms with oddly spicy blossoms to this day. As you explore deeper into the lab, you notice small brass tokens beside many bottles. These are mood markers, little weights, with etched faces, smile, frown, stoic, contemplative. They were meant to indicate how a scent might affect the wearer's emotions. Ahead of his time. Maybe. A little dramatic, certainly. Selim took his scent rituals seriously. Before every major decision, military, romantic, or culinary, he would sit alone in this room, eyes closed, surrounded by small cotton pads soaked in different oils. Aides were instructed to leave him be for at least 30 minutes or until he emerged with a verdict and a new blend to mark the occasion. You glance at a small black box in the corner labeled "Scents Not to be Discussed." Tempting, but locked, probably for a reason. And yet not all was serious here. One section of the shelf contains prank blends. Yes, prank blends. One named Tomato Majesty was reportedly developed just to confuse a visiting Venetian who claimed to have a flawless nose. The man guessed royal tulip. He was never corrected. And then there's the infamous April 1st batch, a scent that smelled different depending on body temperature. On one advisor, it was lavender. On another, garlic and regret. You sit at the wooden stool beside the ferret's perch. Citrus eyes you, but doesn't move. Maybe he's already judged your aroma. Or maybe he's waiting for you to knock over the oil labeled unwise decisions, which, if the smudged note beneath it is accurate, was based on Salim's least favorite dinner guest. You let the quiet take over. The bubbling of the still, the scent of clove rising slowly. The knowledge that down here, far from the political ceremonies and public declarations, a sultan once stood exactly where you are, measuring, blending, dreaming of the perfect scent. And for a moment, you're not in the 21st century. You're just another pair of hands in the long, fragrant legacy of a man who believed that history should smell good. Now imagine this. You're standing in a palace antechamber, nervously holding a scroll sealed in wax and lightly scented with rose. You've just arrived from a distant land, Venice perhaps, or the Safavid court in Isfahan. You're not here to declare war or forge an alliance. You're here to negotiate with your nose. Because in the court of Sultan Selim II, diplomacy didn't start with handshakes or negotiations. It began with perfume. You shift your weight in the slippered shoes you've been provided. The marble floor is cool beneath your feet, and the air is thick with the smell of something both exotic and oddly comforting. A blend of saffron, citrus, and maybe cardamom, it's hard to say. The scent makes your ears relax, which is not something you've ever experienced before. This is the Sultan's diplomatic greeting chamber, designed not for verbal posturing, but for scent-based persuasion. When emissaries entered this room, they were immediately enveloped in a carefully curated aromatic environment. And before they were offered sherbet or invited to sit, they were offered a scented cloth to inhale. Not a coincidence, not a cultural quirk, a calculated move. You're experiencing what historians now refer to as olfactory diplomacy, a term so niche that even spell check raises an eyebrow. Still, Selim was one of its earliest and most enthusiastic practitioners. You inhale again. This one smells like the promise of cooperation, or maybe like apple blossoms. Hard to tell. The concept was simple. When two cultures met, their customs clashed language, dress, body language. But scent bypassed all that. The nose doesn't negotiate, it feels. So if Selim could set the emotional tone before a single word was exchanged, he had already taken the upper hand. Records show that emissaries from different regions were greeted with personalized scent profiles crafted based on their homeland's botanical signatures. The Spanish orange blossom and cinnamon, the Persians rose saffron, and something smoky, perhaps burnt pistachio shell, the French lavender thyme, and a faint trace of honeyed lemon. One particularly sensitive ambassador from the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth reportedly wept upon entering the hall, overwhelmed by a scent that reminded him of his grandmother's garden. Whether this was intentional or just lucky blending is still debated. And it wasn't just guests who were strategically perfumed. The Sultan himself was known to switch his personal fragrance depending on the visiting nation. Before meeting a Russian envoy, He wore a deep resinous musk to project stoicism. Before hosting a North African delegation, he chose something bright and citrusy, welcoming but assertive. His robes, too, were scented, folded between layers of clove and rosewood, until the fabric itself smelled regal. There's even a story too delicious not to be true about Selim wearing a fragrance named Peace Negotiation Number 3, a blend of myrtle and mint meant to encourage compromise. Did it work? That's unclear. But the ambassador did leave with an extra pouch of rose jam. You glance around the room, noting the small vents near the floor, not for heating, for dispersing scent. Behind the walls, palace perfumers adjusted ratios like a modern-day lighting technician at a rock concert, raising the intensity of sandalwood, lowering the rose and introducing a thread of lime if the mood got too tense. One scholar claims these scent adjustment strategies were written into the court protocol as emotive modulation directives. Another claims that's a modern historian getting a bit too excited. Either way, the results spoke for themselves. In fact, some diplomats began arriving with their own perfumed defenses. One Genoese merchant reportedly doused his beard in vinegar to shield his intentions. The Sultan was not impressed. The merchant was offered soap and a towel and a suggestion that perhaps trade negotiations should be conducted outdoors. Selim's most famous diplomatic fragrance, however, was a blend known as Golden Bridge. It was composed of rose orange blossom almond and a resin imported from India that reportedly made listeners more agreeable, or at least more willing to sit quietly while Selim spoke. The original recipe was lost, but attempts to recreate it still exist in Turkish apothecaries today. Most agree the effect is pleasant, but won't get you a trade deal. You move toward a corner of the room where small scent stones are displayed on silk cushions. These are scent tokens, gifts given to favored diplomats, each one embedded with a blend that supposedly captures the meeting's emotional spirit. One labeled Productive Disagreement smells oddly like roasted hazelnut. Another, Mutual Confusion, emits a blend of marjoram and blue chamomile. Perhaps the most famous token was gifted to a visiting ambassador from the Kingdom of Hungary. After 3 days of tense talks, he was handed a scent stone labeled Understanding. When he returned home, he had it broken open. Inside, a scrap of parchment with a recipe for the blend and a personal note to remember what we agreed on, even if we don't. This scent diplomacy didn't always guarantee results. The Venetians, despite leaving positively glowing reviews of Selim's lavender courtyard, refused to budge on several trade clauses. But even then, they couldn't resist writing about the unusually graceful aromas of negotiation. And maybe that was the point. Even if scent couldn't change foreign policy, it could soften its edges. Like a drop of rosewater in bitter coffee, Selim's diplomacy lingered on the air, subtle and impossible to ignore. You leave the chambers with your head swimming slightly, not from wine or flattery, but from bergamot and memory. You didn't sign a treaty, but you did inhale something unforgettable, and in this empire of silk and scent, sometimes that was enough. You're in the archives now, rows upon rows of scrolls, bound ledgers, and curious bundles of fabric, all catalogued with a kind of quiet reverence. It smells musty, yes, but also faintly of cinnamon beeswax and something vaguely papery like toasted parchment. You think you're here to study royal decrees, ancient treaties, maybe even tax records. But no, you're here for something more fragrant. Because here, tucked between battle reports and bakery inventories, lies one of the most eccentric corners of Ottoman administration, the scented scrolls. That's right. Sultan Selim II didn't just send orders or love notes, he sent them infused with scent. His couriers didn't carry plain parchment. They delivered soft breezes of rose lemon balm, or even a whisper of pepper, depending on the message's tone. You lift one, now careful not to disturb the delicate threads holding the parchment together. It's dry, fragile, but still faintly aromatic. You bring it close to your nose and inhale. Lavender. Or perhaps an aged version of what was once lavender. The practice, while uncommon, was not unheard of in Ottoman courts. Perfumed letters had existed since the early Islamic period and even further back in Persian traditions. But Selim elevated the concept to near obsession. He believed that scent could reinforce meaning. A warm message might carry rose or orange blossom, a warning vetiver, perhaps. The "I'm not mad, just disappointed" scrolls, bitter almond and bay leaf. Historians still argue whether there was an official scent code or if it was more of a poetic flourish. One former palace scribe claimed there was a secret guidebook, the Nose's Glossary, now long lost to time, and possibly chewed by Citrus the ferret. Even foreign dignitaries noted it. A French ambassador once wrote, "The Sultan's decree smells more beautiful than any agreement I have ever signed." Another Venetian commented, "If only their terms were as sweet as their delivery." But not at all the scented scrolls were formal or diplomatic. Some were deeply personal. In one faded letter, Selim writes to his favorite concubine. Her name has been lost, unfortunately, detailing a new scent he's working on: fig honey, smoke, and clove. He calls it Midnight Conversation. The scroll was lightly infused with amber and dried rose petals. The letter ends simply, "Until you return to me, this will wear your absence." You move to another section of the archive, where the incident files are stored, because of course not all fragrance-based communication went according to plan. There was, for example, the Great Cinnamon Confusion of 1569. Apparently, a shipment of scented scrolls had been placed too close to the palace kitchens. Several absorbed the smell of boiling cinnamon syrup used in a popular dessert. This resulted in multiple conflicting interpretations of the same order. One soldier believed he was to reinforce a border fort. Another thought it meant to prepare sweet cakes for visiting troops. Selim reportedly found it hilarious. The scrolls were rewritten. The cinnamon pudding was served anyway. Then there's the disaster of the over-oud edict. Oud rich, smoky, musky was beloved by many. But when Selim attempted to send a strongly worded message to a rebellious provincial governor, he decided to soak the parchment in an especially potent blend. The result, the message arrived unreadable, not because of damage, but because the governor refused to open the scroll, claiming it had the scent of punishment. Historians still debate whether this was a deliberate act of defiance or just a very sensitive nose. More subtle mishaps occurred too. One record details a courtship gone sour after a poetic note meant to be sweetened with rose accidentally absorbed the vinegar fumes from an adjacent pickling barrel. The recipient never replied. Understandable, really. You sit beside a table where dozens of scroll fragments are stored in glass cases. Some still hold their scent, barely delicately. You smell clove, faint bergamot. One smells like musty coriander and old incense, not altogether unpleasant, like thyme in a bottle. Nearby, a junior archivist brushes resin dust from a half-burnt letter. When asked what it smells like, she replies, regret and pine. You nod. That checks out. Of course, scent wasn't always romantic or expressive. It had its bureaucratic uses. Scented parchment was harder for insects to chew. Some historians believe Selim insisted on perfuming important decrees, not for beauty, but for preservation. Others argue he just enjoyed the extra flourish. After all, if you're already sending out an imperial edict, why wouldn't you want it to smell like a spring meadow? You glance at one final scroll, still sealed, still mysterious. The wax is pale green, the thread silk, no label, only a faint haunting scent of almond and ash. No one's opened it. Maybe no one dares, because here in this kingdom of scent and ink, the lines between art message and mood are blurred. Selim didn't just rule with words, he ruled with atmosphere. And now you're part of that atmosphere, breathing it in, letting it wrap around your thoughts, like a letter written in perfume, drifting softly across time. The palace corridors have a rhythm to them now, a kind of scented choreography. You follow the sound of slippers on polished floors, the hush of silk brushing silk, and the faint pop of a sandalwood incense bead as it hits a brazier. But today, the usual calm feels off. You enter the hall of attendance, a quiet, sun-dappled space filled with cushions, trays of dried fruit, and eunuchs lounging, or rather brooding, under painted arches. The scent in the air is unfamiliar, not unpleasant, but sharp, assertive, maybe a touch too assertive, sandalwood, and a lot of it. You've walked into what court scribes later called the Lavender Rebellion. Don't let the floral name fool you. This was one of the most delicately handled uprisings in Ottoman palace history, led not by generals, but by a coalition of disgruntled eunuchs armed with passive aggression and finely tuned noses. It started as many great palace dramas do, with a new perfume blend. Sultan Selim, ever the enthusiastic experimenter, had commissioned a new base scent for official palace linens, a blend of sandalwood, dried orange peel, and crushed violet. The intention, a warming, earthy note to balance Istanbul's increasingly rainy autumns. Unfortunately, sandalwood, at least in these quantities, made some of the inner court feel claustrophobic. The eunuchs who handled almost everything in the harem, from logistics to ceremony, spent hours surrounded by thick cushions and velvet curtains. And when those were all infused with a scent that reminded them of overly perfumed furniture polish, tensions rose. Slowly at first, one eunuch began airing out curtains prematurely. Another accidentally spilled rose water over a pile of sandalwood-treated towels. A third simply refused to enter certain rooms unless they smelled more like freedom. Historians still argue whether this was a spontaneous revolt or an organized protest. One anonymous letter, found years later, hinted at coded meetings in the laundry chambers where plans were made, and alternative scent proposals drafted on scraps of linen, and yet the rebellion never got loud. These were professionals, after all. No marching, no chanting, just a series of increasingly pointed gestures, fresh lavender sachets tucked into sandalwood drawers, basil sprigs left accidentally on official bedding, and the most brazen move of all, sprinkling dried mint leaves on the Sultan's private sitting cushion. Selim, to his credit, noticed. Rather than respond with fury, he saw an opportunity for what he called fragrance diplomacy. He summoned the senior eunuchs and asked for a list of their top 5 scent grievances. The results were brutally honest. Too much sandalwood. Musk in the laundry rooms is completely unnecessary. Pine resin causes drowsiness. Frankincense belongs in the mosque, not the privy. Whoever mixed thyme and apricot should be demoted. Selim responded not with scolding, but with a contest. Each faction of the harem eunuchs, concubines, scribes, even the gardeners, was invited to submit their own preferred scent blend for the autumn season. The winning blend would be used in palace linens robes and incense burners for 3 full months. The result, a brief but brilliant explosion of creativity. The scribes submitted a blend of ink, almond blossom, and jasmine. The concubines proposed pomegranate cardamom and white musk. The eunuchs, a bold cleansing trio, lavender, mint, and lemon peel. Selim smelled each submission personally and announced the winner in a formal ceremony where scrolls were spritzed instead of sealed. The eunuch's blend won, of course, not only because it smelled crisp and soothing, but because it was a victory long overdue. Thus began the Lavender Quarter, a 3-month period in palace history where the official scent profile was bright herbal and refreshingly devoid of sandalwood. Productivity soared, tempers cooled. One advisor even claimed he solved an ongoing trade dilemma after taking a nap on a mint-scented cushion. But the victory wasn't just olfactory. It symbolized something else, that in the world of Selim II, even a nose could negotiate, even a scent could speak, and more importantly, that fragrance was a shared language, a way to express dissent, delight, memory, and mood. You sit now in that same hall, the lavender still lingering though faint. On a nearby cushion, an old embroidered label peeks out, Rebellion Blend 1571. You breathe it in. Still soft, still a little sassy, and as sunlight drifts through the arched windows, painting scent trails in the warm air, you smile, because here, even rebellion smelled nice. You've wandered deeper into the palace now, through a narrow corridor that smells of ink, beeswax, and something sweeter, something elusive. It clings to the air like a secret whispered through silk. You're entering a chamber not marked on most court maps, a cozy, tucked-away corner filled with scrolls, jewelry boxes, and velvet-wrapped bottles. This is where love lived, and by love, of course, we mean love notes in oud. Oud, sometimes called liquid gold, was one of the most luxurious substances in the empire. Derived from agar wood, infected by a specific mold, it produced a resinous scent that was smoky, musky, and deeply grounding. Sultan Selim II adored it, and he used it for more than just bathing robes and wall hangings. He used it to say what he couldn't always write. In the Ottoman court, where eyes were everywhere, and words could become weapons, scent was a safe space for longing, a language beyond protocol. and Selim, ever the artist, mastered that language with heart-wrenching skill. You lean over a table now, peering at a small collection of linen ribbons, each bound with a bead of wax. These are perfumed messages often sent between members of the harem and the Sultan himself. Historians have recovered dozens of these carefully preserved in bundles, stored in cedar chests, away from light and moths. Some had notes scribbled between the threads. Others carried no writing at all, just a scent. One that smells of blackcurrant and mint is labeled "She danced near the fountain." Another soft with rose and powdered clove. "He did not speak, but he stayed." And then there are the most daring of all scent pairings, used to compose entire dialogues. Yes, fragrant conversations. You sit cross-legged on a cushion and unravel the legend of one such aromatic exchange between Selim and a favored court musician. They couldn't speak freely, too many ears, too much protocol. But they could send handkerchiefs and fans subtly dusted with scent. She sent violet and honey. He replied with almond and jasmine. She answered in cinnamon and lemon balm, sharp, hopeful. He followed with oud, deep and warm. What were they saying? We don't know. But the pattern, once decoded by scent historians, reveals a call and response, a longing, a teasing, and eventually a kind of peace. One courtier joked that you could tell who was falling in love by the trail they left behind. "He smells like cedar and poor judgment," he wrote of a fellow advisor. "Someone in the harem is writing him bedtime stories in basil again." But it wasn't just romantic. Scent-laced items were also used by mothers separated from their children, wives from traveling husbands, and even between Selim and his closest advisors. One famous exchange involves a robe infused with chamomile and myrrh, sent from Selim to his grand vizier during a particularly tense debate. The vizier returned it days later, unscented, folded neatly. The message was clear: "I hear you. I'm thinking." Historians still argue whether these gestures actually swayed policy or were merely symbolic. But in a court ruled by subtlety, a symbolic scent was often louder than a spoken word. One curious detail the palace maintained: a scent registry, a document kept by the chief perfumer noting which blends had been used in recent weeks. Not for inventory, but for emotional reference. If a concubine seemed unusually distant, her recent scents were reviewed. If an advisor was moody, someone checked for clove or sage residue on his collar. The goal not to control, just to understand. You reach for a silk pouch left half open on a desk. Inside is a folded note and a scent vial labeled 2 steps from the garden. You remove the stopper and inhale. It's fresh, green, a little melancholic, like walking alone where someone once laughed. You don't need the letter. You already know what it says. Here fragrance becomes feeling, a shortcut to memory, a kind of emotional shorthand in a palace too large for shouting and too dignified for tears. And while no one ever wrote a treaty on love's foreign policy, you suspect Selim came close. He just wrote it in oud. You step into the corridor, again carrying the echo of violet and almond behind you. Somewhere in the palace, a lute begins to play, and someone quietly is answering in rose. You followed the trail of oud and almond to a colder part of the palace, the winter hallways where stone floors echo and the air has that still watchful quality that says something important has happened here. You're not wrong, because tonight we unravel a fragrant scandal, a quiet storm in silk slippers and clove oil. This is the tale of a rival's stolen recipe, the closest the Ottoman perfume world ever got to espionage. It starts with a blend, an exquisite one. Historians refer to it only as Formula X. Created in the latter years of Selim's reign, it was said to balance smoky agarwood crushed rose petals, a hint of saffron, and something no one could quite identify, described vaguely as like snow just before it melts. Only 3 people knew the full recipe: the Sultan, his chief perfumer, and a mute scribe whose job was simply to memorize ingredient ratios and nod sagely when asked questions he couldn't legally answer. The blend was destined for Selim's personal use, though rumors swirled that it was being developed as a signature scent for peace, a kind of olfactory emblem that might one day be worn by dignitaries on both sides of the Ottoman-Safavid rivalry. But one evening, during what should have been a routine gathering of courtiers, musicians, and low-stakes intrigue, the air smelled too familiar. A visiting envoy from Persia, a tall man with perfectly pleated sleeves and a suspiciously charming smile, entered the banquet hall. When he passed Selim, the Sultan tilted his head, sniffed once, then twice. He knew that scent. Subtler than jasmine, deeper than incense. His scent, except it wasn't on his own robes, it was trailing behind a foreign diplomat. What followed was not a dramatic confrontation. No storming of chambers, no flung goblets or loud accusations. That wasn't Selim's style. Instead, he simply smiled and ordered mint tea. But back in his private quarters, the notes began to fly. Secret scrolls, scent samples retrieved from discarded garments, ferret-assisted perimeter checks. Citrus Ever Loyal was reportedly deployed to sniff out trace elements on linens left behind by the envoy's entourage. The scandal grew from rumor to official investigation within days. One junior perfumer was caught bragging quietly in the wrong courtyard that he'd shared a sample with a friend. That friend, as it turned out, worked in the Persian embassy. The palace walls might not have ears, but they definitely had noses. Punishment was swift, though not as harsh as you might imagine. The offending perfumer was reassigned to the rose gardens. Not exiled, just demoted, Selim reportedly said. Let him grow the scents he gave away. The Persian envoy, meanwhile, denied everything. Coincidence, he claimed. Perhaps we are simply drawn to similar notes. Historians still debate whether this was outright theft or something more complicated. Some say the envoy used trade negotiations as cover to steal scent recipes. Others suggest the blend was recreated independently and that scent like poetry floats freely across borders. Still, the damage was done. Selim retired Formula X from his collection. He deemed it compromised, though one advisor later remarked it smelled even better with betrayal. In its place, Selim commissioned a new scent, something colder, clearer. It reportedly involved mint cedarwood and crushed violet with none of the warmth of the original. This one was called The Distance Between Us, and he wore it for the remainder of the year. You walk now into a smaller side room, once used for diplomatic seating, now quiet. A glass cabinet holds 3 surviving vials of the stolen blend, sealed, labeled, and never opened. One bears a note in Salim's own hand, mine, once. There's a lesson here if you care to find it, that in a world where scent is power, even the air you wear must be protected. That perfume, unlike a jewel, can be stolen with a breath. But perhaps more than anything, it reminds you that even in a palace of roses, politics always finds its way in. Even in the language of fragrance, there is jealousy, rivalry, strategy. You inhale just slightly. The room smells clean, neutral, a hint of old paper and faint myrrh. The scent of secrets sealed tightly. And somewhere miles away, maybe in a different court, under a different sky, someone else might be wearing Formula X, never knowing its full history. Only that it smells like something once treasured and once taken. Tonight the palace smells like confidence. You're in the main ceremonial hall now. High ceilings, tiled columns, a skylight diffusing soft moonlight across the marble floor. Velvet cushions line the walls. Candles flicker from ornate holders, and the air is thick with the richest blend you've yet encountered. Something like amber, but warmer. Musk, but cleaner. Spices, but not sharp, more like memory than fire. This is His Highness, the human diffuser phase of Sultan Selim II's life. Because by this point in his reign, the Sultan wasn't just a man who enjoyed fragrance. He had become fragrance, or at least the closest thing the 16th century had to a walking, talking, ruling perfume boutique. Selim was a layering genius. He didn't just dab on rose oil and call it a day. No, his scent was curated like a symphony. There was a top note, a mid-note, and a long-lasting bass that clung to his robes like royal decree. Court attendants maintained a scent schedule. Before sunrise, a touch of bitter orange and green tea leaf was massaged into the lining of his underrobe. Mid-morning required a soft mist of bergamot, rose, and cedar. Afternoon time for the bolder stuff, cardamom, sandalwood, sometimes even a drop of oud. Evening was lavender, black pepper, and sometimes a very risky clove-cinnamon blend known as the Grand Vizier's Folly, which caused a mild scandal the first time it was used in public. His shoes, clove-smoked and lined with herb-scented leather. His ink infused with violet and citrus zest. Even his turban, hand-wrapped daily, was stored in a cedar-lined chest with dried sage, because the brain thinks better when the air around it smells wise. Historians still argue whether this level of scent strategy was driven by ego or genuine olfactory delight. Probably both. One scribe wrote that when His Majesty enters a room, his presence is known before he speaks and missed long after he leaves, because the scent remains. Indeed, foreign guests often remarked on this. One Venetian ambassador described the Sultan's arrival as a breeze from paradise with shoes. A Polish noble noted that Selim smelled like if power could be polite, and a Moroccan diplomat, clearly flustered, simply wrote, "He smelled very expensive." Selim's presence became so tied to his scent that palace guards reportedly memorized his fragrance sequence each day in order to anticipate his movements. If the scent of lemon balm passed their post, they knew he was heading toward the garden. If the air turned to smoke and rosewood, it was time to clear the courtyard. He was coming. Even more impressive, the scent rarely overpowered, the mark of a true artisan. Selim had perfected the art of scent diffusion. His robes were layered not just in fabric, But in time, each section released fragrance as the day wore on, thanks to a combination of temperature oils and the way the robes moved through the air. One of his attendants described the effect as like watching a painting unfold in fragrance. But not everyone appreciated this aromatic theatricality. There was famously a military advisor who objected. He claimed the scent cloud made it difficult to focus. "It's hard to think about border disputes when you smell like a dessert," he complained. Selim's response: he sent him a new robe infused with rosemary and sage to help clear the mind. The advisor never complained again. You pause beside a tall mirror. It's rimmed in brass, fogged gently from the warmth of the room. You imagine stepping into Selim's slippers, feeling the perfume cloud shift around you with each breath. It's a kind of power that's quiet, invisible, but undeniable, and not just political. Selim reportedly believed that wearing a consistent fragrance helped him make better decisions. He once wrote, "If my scent is stable, so is my judgment." There's even evidence that he changed his mind on a military campaign after realizing the scent that morning had been over-oiled. "Too strong," he said. It clouded the air and the plan. You admire the discipline, the detail, the dedication to crafting not just a public image, but a public atmosphere. It wasn't vanity, it was design. A design so complete that even now, centuries later, you can almost feel it brushing past you. Because the thing about scent is, it lingers. And the thing about Selim was he knew it would. You leave the chamber in silence, walking through the last wisps of a blend you can't quite name. Something herbal, regal, lonely maybe. His scent still waiting. Tonight the air is still. You're in a quiet, locked wing of the palace now, far from the ceremonial halls, beyond the harem gardens, past the kitchens and spice corridors. It's dark here, lit only by wall lamps, fed with slow-burning oil, the flames barely flickering. The scent barely there. But you notice it, something faintly floral, with a smoky shadow, something missing. This is the story of the disappearing fragrance, a mystery wrapped in silk and lost to time. According to court rumor, there was one final perfume, Selim's ultimate blend, his last creation, never worn publicly, never bottled for ambassadors, never named in the official scent registries. It existed only briefly, like a whisper in a thunderstorm, and then it vanished. Historians first stumbled upon it in the margins of a forgotten journal kept by an elderly court perfumer known only as H.B. He described the blend simply, "too beautiful for repetition. It smells like the last time someone looked back." That line alone sparked decades of speculation. You're walking now through the perfumer's old archive, lined with drawers labeled in delicate Ottoman script. Many are sealed. One cracked open contains faded scent strips wrapped in linen. Some still hold trace notes, frankincense, fig, rose-crushed tea leaves, but none match the profile hinted at in H.B.'s journal. One theory: the formula was burned after Selim's death on his own orders. A poetic final act. "No one should wear my memory," he supposedly said. A lovely quote, but completely unverified. Another theory is that the perfume wasn't burned. It simply failed, that it couldn't be replicated, that the ingredients were too rare or too unstable to bind correctly. a kind of alchemical misfire that worked only once under the precise humidity, temperature, and mood of a single autumn evening in 1572. There's one more theory, and it's stranger still. Some believe the perfume never existed at all, that it was an idea Selim was chasing. An ideal fragrance, one that could capture memory, longing, power, and peace in a single bottle. The scent of a lifetime's ambition condensed. Not a product, but a dream. The act of searching for it, they say, was the true artistry. Like trying to bottle the moonlight, you lean over a velvet-draped table where a single black vial rests. It's labeled with one word, never. The wax seal is unbroken. Could this be it? The last fragrance. You pick it up. It's cool to the touch. The label has no flourish, no crest. Just those 5 letters, elegant, precise, a final shrug from history itself. The vial was discovered years after Selim's death, tucked inside a folded robe in the corner of his private study. The robe still smelled faintly of orange blossom, but the vial untouched. No one has opened it, or if they have, no one has admitted to it. One palace document notes that a perfumer named Riha was assigned to test the vial's contents in the early 1600s, but his journal skips the date entirely. Just a blank space where the entry should be. The next day's page reads, "Back to Rose." Much safer. Another whisper tells of a concubine who claimed she once smelled the final blend on Selim's skin, moments before he dismissed her with a kiss and a smile. It smelled, she said, like something finished. You stare at the vial. You could open it. You could break the wax, twist the cap, and breathe in whatever last thing the Sultan left behind. But you don't, because some stories are best left suspended. Some scents belong to the past, and Selim, the Sultan of scents, knew better than anyone the most powerful perfume is the one you only remember. You place the vial back gently. The room sighs. Somewhere behind you, a window shudders softly in the wind, and as you leave the chamber, you carry with you a fragrance you've never smelled, one that feels like silk silence and maybe a little sadness. The palace is asleep now. You step through its quietest corridor, where the lamps burn low and the shadows move slower. You pass the gardens, the hammam, the library of scented scrolls. Each place still holds something of him, a memory, a mood, a trace of perfume in the air. This is a legacy in the air. Sultan Selim II, who ruled with an iron nose and a soft heart, left behind no towering pyramids, no blood-soaked battlefields immortalized in stone. But his legacy, it lingers. It lingers in the language of fragrance. Selim's perfume obsession outlived him, quietly reshaping the Ottoman court for decades. His scent protocols were adopted into ceremonial practice. Ambassadors continued to be greeted with fragrance offerings. The hammam's rotation of seasonal oils became tradition, and his notes, his careful poetic scent journals, were copied, studied, whispered about. Even his ferret citrus earned a footnote in history. According to one final scroll, citrus lived to an impressive age and was buried beneath the perfumer's courtyard, wrapped in a rosemary-scented cloth and mourned by at least one tearful junior apprentice. The footnote ends with a line, "He always knew which vial to nudge." Historians still argue how much of Selim's fragrant empire was genuine innovation and how much was eccentric indulgence. But as you breathe in the layers of scent still folded into these walls, You realize it doesn't matter. He turned air into art. In the centuries that followed, merchants from Istanbul began selling scent blends inspired by his court. Names like Sultan's Garden, Midnight in the Hammam, and the Lavender Accord appeared in apothecaries from Cairo to Marseille. No one knew the exact formulas, but they all agreed the Sultan's spirit was somewhere in the mix. Even modern perfumers cite him. One Turkish artisan recently recreated a scent based on descriptions from Selim's journals. It sold out in a week. The review's haunting. Feels like a letter from someone long gone. Warm, but with an ache in it. And here's the strange part, they weren't wrong, because Selim didn't just blend oils and petals. He blended memory. He wrapped time around cinnamon sticks and soaked heartache into dried fig. He knew that the nose could carry what the tongue could never say. He understood that the air we move through isn't empty. It's filled with ghosts, with longing, with the soft, invisible weight of everything that came before us. You pause beneath an archway where the scent changes just slightly. You can't quite name it. Something delicate, maybe regret, maybe rain. You wonder if that was his final blend after all. Not bottled, not written down, just left behind. You lie down now on a silk couch near the edge of the garden. The night has cooled and a breeze moves through the citrus trees. The stars above the Bosphorus flicker like little oil lamps left for wandering spirits. And for a moment, you think you smell something familiar. Maybe bergamot, maybe goodbye. The scent fades now. The palace quiets. The garden's still. The oils and herbs and smoke from long ago curl softly into the night air as if exhaling one last time. You're far from Istanbul now, centuries away, but you've carried something with you, a trail of amber, a note of violet, a whisper of lavender left behind on a silk robe folded centuries ago. The details blur as they always do. Which scent came first? Who wore what and why? What was written? What was real? It doesn't matter, because stories are like perfume. You don't need to hold the bottle to remember the smell. And this one, the story of a sultan who ruled not just with policy, but with poetry, with powder, with petals, and patience that one lingers. So rest now. Let the scents drift from your thoughts. Let your body settle like rose dust on velvet. Let the world of court intrigues and sandalwood diplomacy fold into silence. There's nothing to do here anymore. No scrolls to decipher, no vials to open, no gardens to walk, only air and the faint trace of something lovely. So breathe in slowly, exhale completely, and sleep.